This is not, and never has been, the way in which Judaism has been interpreted and applied.
They are standing on their principles.
There is a Zionist neshama. They just don't like to use the word Zionism.
Israel was born with miracles, and I think the new miracle is going to be the awakening and the participation of the Haredi community.
Welcome back, everybody, to our new episode of The Quad. With me in the studio, Ashira Solomon, political commentator and moderator in Tel Aviv, our friend Vivian Berkovich, former ambassador of Canada to Israel and the founder and star of her own podcast, State of Tel Aviv podcast. Our friend Emily Schrader is in the United States doing very important work on student campuses. But we have a treat this week, and that is a really old friend of mine. She's not old. We're just old friends. Pnina Pfeuffer, who is a Haredi activist. She is the director, the CEO of the New Haredim, which is an organization, which is an umbrella organization of many different Haredi organizations fighting for policy change in the Haredi community, encompassing many activist, and does fantastic work for her community. Welcome to the Quad as a guest co-host. Pnina, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
It's really wonderful to have you here. Pnina and I were hoping many years ago to break the ceiling for Haredi women in politics, and we will get there, Pnina.
Yeah, that's a story for another day.
That's a story for another day. But Pnina, today we wanted to talk about, and this is why we invited you on the program, and we're going to have a very exciting, also special guest to interview. And there's a lot of talk these days about the Haredi community, around the Haredi draft. And so many people in Israel, especially right now, when everybody's sons and daughters are in the front lines fighting in this cruel war that we didn't start, that we didn't want, we have another community, the Ultra-Orthodox community, that has always kept themselves separate from the regular Israeli society for many reasons, but mainly in order not to, I guess, integrate into the wider society. I did my thesis when I did my master's on the Haredi community, and it was very clear to me that essentially they're building walls in order to keep their young people in order to make sure that this maximalist form of religion remains the norm in the community. And as a result, the educational system of Haredi boys stops teaching core curriculum at age 11 and discourage men from doing their army service. So the issue of Haredi draft is now becoming very prevalent because we're in the middle of the war, because people actually feel, well, why is everybody else's sons and daughters have to serve to protect their country and the privilege to be in this country, and the Haredi community don't? And so as we are moderate women who want to hear all perspectives, we wanted to hear the Haredi perspective, the perspective of the modern Haredim, the perspective of the Haredim that are moving into the future, and also ladies, our perspective. And so on that note, Vivian, you've been very vocal and, you're very knowledgeable on the subject. So tell us a little bit about how you, from the perspective of Tel Aviv, the state of Tel Aviv, the secular community that you speak for in many ways, how are you seeing what's going on today in Israel?
I'm seeing it as probably one of the most profound crises that the state has ever faced. I just want to make a few comments on the presentation, which is fabulous. I would not refer to it as the Haredi draft issue. I would refer to it as the draft issue.
I agree.
There is a national draft law. We don't get the secular draft issue. We don't get the Mizrahi draft issue. There is a draft. The other thing that I think is important for our listeners to be aware of is it's not just our young who are being sent to fight. The age for serving in reserve duty now is up to age 40, and many people voluntarily go and serve well into their 40s and 50s. But there are a number of very significant changes being contemplated right now by the government because we have a severe shortage of soldiers.
That's right. So it comes
in
with a
Army.
real need,
Number
right,
one,
Vivian?
Total need. They're talking about raising the age for reserve duty from 40 to 46, which kind of puts us into like Iran-Iraq war territory, like when they were sending grandfathers to the front. It increases the time required for reserve duty from 30 days per year to 60 or 70, depending on your unit. and it increases the time required to be served as compulsory duty. So that is a huge burden on the small number that already carry a huge burden. And the other part is the economics. Not only are they exempted from serving in the army, the ultra-Orthodox, but they are also supported by the state. So they are not working, they're not generating wealth. I think the stats for men being employed in any regard has plummeted in recent years because of the generosity of the state. So they are net takers by any measure, and they refuse to serve. It's not that they resist or are discouraged. I would say that they are bribed by their own communities. It is made so difficult for Haredi men or boys who do want to volunteer. It is made almost impossible for them to do so. And I think those are really important points to be made.
I think what we're talking about is from the
the
perspective of the average Israeli family who has a child serving. I think we've gotten to a stage when everybody feels enough is enough. And I want to add that we should also talk about the Arabs, in the sense that the Arab community, for us not to put them in a position that they might feel that they're going against their own Palestinian brethren, do not serve. But none of these reasons preclude any of either the Arab or the Haredi community from talking, for example, about national service, which is something that many people do and could be a potential solution. I want to come to Pnina for a second. Pnina, you hear what's going on. You are from the Haredi community, albeit you're a forward-facing, modern Haredi woman. I want you to kind of bridge this gap of how you think the average Israeli sees things and how you feel the Haredi Street see this.
Well, I'm just going to add to what you opened with.
Yes.
Haredi women aren't drafted either. Haredi women get a full deferment.
Right.
No one's even talking about them. Okay,
and they don't have to do national service like religious Zionist girls.
Well, it's national service is a volunteer program. It's just that religious Zionist women choose to volunteer mostly.
Right.
And Haredi women don't. And there's the same reasons for not being drafted as the same reasons that they don't volunteer for national service.
Right.
So there's the women as well. It's not just the men. It's just that everyone's talking about the men in the hopes that they'll be first.
Of course.
Vivian mentioned that employment has plummeted. It has not plummeted. It just hasn't risen.
It hasn't risen. It's stuck.
Despite investments of billions and billions by philanthropy and government.
Billions.
And the needle hasn't moved.
That's right.
Side note, my opinion is you have to start with the education system. You can't fix things at 25 and build hospitals under the bridge. It works for a little bit, but it doesn't really change the reality. So that was the focus. And now, things have gone through different stages, and now we're in a war. And like you said, we're sending our young. It's not just that. It's also they want to raise the draft for reserve duty in age and in the amount of days in a year. So I have friends who are, secular, and they're furious. And not just secular, actually, also national religious. It's, it's coming from all directions.
Absolutely.
Because everybody's sending their kids to the army except us.
Yes. So is there any type of understanding in the Haredi Street that things are going to change, whether they like it or not?
I tried asking, my friends who are in, the Haredi political arena, not the MKs, but their, assistants and people who work with
their
them.
Advisors, yeah.
Yeah, just to they understand that there's an issue. I don't think they understand how severe and how intense and how all-encompassing and how angry, I don't think they get it, the way we see it as like a major, major issue. They think this too shall pass. They're still in that mindset, a lot of them.
I also think it's important to point out that Haredi women, and this is a new development since the 80s and 90s, do everything. They start having babies young. They have lots of babies. They work full time. They run the home. They consider it the greatest kavod, the greatest honor, to do everything so that their husbands may study full time and be closer to God and Torah. So I just think it's important to understand the burden that the Haredi world has shifted towards imposing on women. And we'll get to the founding of the state eventually, but this is not and never has been the way in which Judaism has been interpreted and applied for over
Exactly.
2,500 years.
This is an Israeli phenomenon, which I think is important to explain to people. Maybe Vivian, you'll help us understand a little bit more. That Ben Gurion came up with a deal with the Haredi leaders in just a few months before the state was established. Originally the purpose and the motivation was that Torah study had been destroyed. The Torah institutions of Eastern Europe had been destroyed through the Holocaust. And so we needed that space for ultra-Orthodox men to rebuild those Torah institutions.
No, the status quo was Shabbat, Kashrut, life cycle like marriage and divorce, and independent education.
For the ultra-Orthodox.
Yeah.
So
that was the status quo.
It didn't include yeshiva study?
No.
And when did that come about?
That came about in a meeting with the Chazon Ish.
Yes.
Rabbi Avram Yeshayahu Karelitz, I don't know, maybe in the early 50s.
Right.
There were around 400 yeshiva men, young men studying.
That was it.
And that was it. Basically, Ben Gurion was like 400 people, whatever. I don't need this headache, I think if I tried to imagine what was going through his head at the time.
Well, we're trying to survive as a young country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also
this is great.
At the time.
Yeah.
Haredim did serve in the army. In the
They
48
did.
war.
They did serve in the army.
And-
Well, some do too. And some do today.
No, but in percentages, it was a lot more.
Yes.
Because if you weren't actually studying, and you were just Haredi, you went to the army in some capacity. And that changed at some point.
Yes.
The idea that just being born Haredi basically grants you a deferment is something that happened in the last 30 years.
Ashira, how do you see this?
One, I agree that the Haredi should share the burden and that they all should, especially in wartime, should go to the army or do some type of national service. However, if I'm playing devil's advocate, if I was a libertarian coming from America and looking at this, I would say...
Are you?
No, but I am conservative, but I'm not a libertarian. I would look at it and say, oh, this is a community that doesn't support the state. It doesn't support the government. This is a community that I imagine doesn't want their community exposed to secularism. And so because I don't support the state and I don't support this government, I'm going to opt out of serving this government.
But they are the government.
Right.
The problem is that the government...
And they take...
If they didn't take entitlements...
They're literally the government.
That's my other point. Then I would push back on them and say, okay, you believe that the land is holy, so you'll live here because the land is holy. You don't support the government. Then also don't take welfare. But I mean, I can just imagine that they're standing on their principles.
It's very interesting because, and we're going to bring our guest in. I actually did when I did my master's on conflict management and resolution at Hebrew University, I did my thesis on the Zionist identity of the Haredim. And people would go, what are you talking about? That's a misnomer. That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so I interviewed some mainstream Haredim. Anybody who's sitting with a woman, of course, is not going to be so extreme. And in fact, I found that there is a Zionist neshama. They just don't like to use the word Zionism because to them, it's connected to secularism.
Right.
And I do think that there are changes, but I also think that as long as their political leadership is there as holding the keys to the government, they're not going to change unless they are pushed, unless they realize their time is up. Because like Pnina says, it is an issue being pushed for years and years and years, hoping it'll pass. Limroach, as we say in Hebrew, let's just keep going.
Yeah.
And this too shall pass. And I think that if something meaningful is going to come out of the horror that we're going through right now, is a new social contract with the ultra-Orthodox, but not doing it in division and hatred, doing it in a sense of kinship and understanding that everybody has to contribute if you want to be in this country.
We're supposed to understand the whole in order to really appreciate the miracle of life. And we don't get to pick just part of it. We just don't. I mean, I'd like to get on that bandwagon, and not work and stuff, but whatever.
No, you don't. I think that
I don't?
I think for a lot of Haredi men, it's very repressive. Unless they're particularly talented
I agree with you.
in their studies, they basically spend their life being
Time wasting or
feeling
frustration. I agree with you, Pnina. I don't think people understand that not everybody's meant to be learning, just like not everybody's meant to be a university professor and sitting or in a lab all day. I think that most people are not supposed to be studying 12 hours a day. And I say, take the 10% who are, give them a bigger stipend, treat them like university professors in terms of financial aid, and the rest of them, like the rest of us, get on your horse, serve the army, and go to work. And now it's our absolute pleasure and honor to have with us Dr. Nechumi Yaffe, who is from the Department of Public Policy in Tel Aviv University. She's also the Vice President of Research for Tatya, which is a Haredi think tank. And we would like Nechumi to really elucidate what's going on at the moment in terms of the issue of the draft in the Haredi community. Welcome, Nechumi. Thank you for being with us.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Nice being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Nechumi, we have also Pnina in the studio with us. We've been speaking about the Haredi draft. And I honestly am somebody who wants to approach this not from a perspective of division, not from a perspective of recrimination. We got to where we got to. Where do we go from here? And how do you see the Haredi community? Do you see it split on this subject? I know that Pnina represents the kind of modern part of the Haredi community. As the Vice President of Research for a Haredi think tank, give us a little bit of a summary of how you see things at the moment.
Okay, so I would just like to reflect what the data that I get. So there are some, good news and some more challenging ones. So if we're going to start with the challenging is, I think vast majority of the Haredi community is misunderstanding the general Israeli, atmosphere. The fact that so many Israelis that were willing to go ahead and, express their appreciation of the Torah are just not willing to go with it anymore. Most Haredim just don't understand.
They don't understand the resentment and the reality of the wider community. That's what you said.
They don't actually understand what it means to conduct a life when you have a husband or a son who is at the army for so long.
Right.
The way it affects everyday life and how it is heavy on the Israeli society. They just know there is miluim. They don't really understand what it means.
What's going to happen, Nechumi? What's the way forward?
I mean, are you asking me as a prophet, or are you asking me of what my assessment? Because
as an academic, as a researcher, as a woman from the Haredi community.
If you're a prophet, then go for the prophet.
Yeah, we had a prophet a couple of weeks ago.
Obviously. Okay, so let's stick with the data. So what definitely I can say is that if Haredim will feel that there are rabbanim, rabbis behind some solutions and their way of life is being protected, we will see a very great willingness to draft. And the more the army is kind of sticking to their own routine, doing their own stuff, we will see higher resistance. I think in reality, since we will have to, do some changes, the Haredi MK will be willing to come to some compromises. We will see more Haredim in the army, but we will see all kind of intermediate plans that are catered towards the Haredi community, that more Haredim will end up in those kind of plans.
Such as national service, Nechumi? Something that could keep
service,
them
yeah, and such all kinds of solutions that are being, at the table right now. I don't think we're going to see major numbers going into, COVID, into the military kind of part of the army. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question, not to be, adversarial, but I genuinely don't understand something really important that you said. And you said that the Haredim, we're speaking obviously globally, right? You said that they don't understand. They just don't understand the reality of the burden of military service. And I sit here and hear something like that. And how can that be? Do they understand the reality of people dying? Do they understand the reality of many fathers, husbands, and sons returning maimed and seriously compromised for life? These are not abstract concepts, and it's not really asking for them to be immersed in secular media to grasp those realities.
Okay, so the reality is that the way we are functioning as human beings, this is not specific to the Haredi community, is that we usually are involved in things that are concerning our our community, or sense of community. So we both know that there is a war in Ukraine right now, but how's it affecting our life, right? So I'm just giving this as an example, and I know it's really painful, but in many ways, we know there is a war. We understand people are dying. We understand people are being, their life are being shattered, but it's not something that we wake up in the morning with, and we actually don't. So in many ways, they know there is a war. They know people are dying. This is their media and their exposure to the world is so censored and so limited.
Echo chamber. They're in their echo chamber.
Yeah, they are just in their own bubble. So we know there is a war in Ukraine, but it doesn't really change our reality, because we all knew that the Haredi community is insular and segregated, and sometimes there is more of an understanding what it means. It really gets people very upset, but that's a reality. In a way, I can, reverse the question and tell you, okay, so you are also, that a Haredi community is segregated, but this is your moment to realize what it means. So you knew it, but you didn't realize what it is. The same way they know there is a war, but they don't realize what it is.
Oh, I think I do realize. I think I understand that they consider themselves to be autonomous. I think we saw this during COVID, and I think we've seen this at many points along the timeline, for the last 30, 40, 50 years. I do find the analogy you're making to our understanding of the fact that there's a war in Ukraine as being in any way comparable. It's a false analogy as far as I'm concerned.
But Vivian, I think the point is that everybody's living in their own echo chamber.
And my point is that me being here and knowing there's a war in Ukraine is very different from me being here in Bnei Brak and not seeing people when I go to the hospital in uniform, not seeing Miluimnikim carrying their guns, not hearing air raid sirens. Like, you can't be oblivious to what is going on here. You can't.
You actually can, and people are. That's the fact.
No, you're saying that you are so upset. How come you can be Jewish, live in Israel, and be so detached? What are you telling me? It is so upsetting. But in the reality, you can't. The fact is, people are. Neighbor, it is completely detached. We don't like it. We don't approve of it. But that's the reality. So we are upset, and rightly so. But that's the reality. So the question is, what do we do given this is the reality?
Nechumi, maybe give us a little bit of hope here and talk about maybe the differences between what we call the mainstream or the hardcore Haredi community and, the more modern Haredi community and how they're reacting to this crisis.
Okay, so actually I can give a lot of hope. And what I would like to introduce that today we can say that unlike the past, or unlike 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, we have over 50% of the Haredi community that are part of reality in many, many ways. They know what's going on, they care about what's going on, and they're looking for ways to take part of it. So some of them are Haredi modern, modern Haredi, but some of them are not even modern Haredi. It's just they are connected to the Israeli reality. So this trend is something that started 10 years ago, and it's strengthening. So this is the people that we're going to end up working with, and they are part of the Haredi community, but they want to be more of a part of the Israeli community, and they are looking for ways to serve, to be part, to communicate, to address, and to do things differently.
Nechumi, are they represented in the political leadership of the Haredi community in the Knesset, in the government?
Okay, so in the general, in the government, they are not yet represented, definitely not as a group, but in the civic, in the
Municipal.
Municipal, we saw it last week.
Yeah.
Actually, there is Mifleget Derech in Bet Shemesh that made it in, which is, reflecting modern Haredim. In a few cities around Israel, we have a representation of Haredim who just want to see things differently. And I'm very, glad to mention that there are actually for the first time, many, around 10 women ran for the municipality. And this time,
Haredi women.
Wow.
yes, and the times when Pnina ran, and
No.
rabbis were against her and her family.
Yeah.
This time, rabbis were, there was no official resistance, which is unprecedented. It's like the first time this just goes without notice. And two Haredi women made it in, one in Ra'anana and one in Pisgat Ze'ev. And this is a silver lining.
I agree with you, because the women are always the innovators, the canary in the mine with these very traditional communities. And to me, this is exactly the sign of what you're saying. The question, I know things, I have to be positive too. And I worked for many years in City Hall with a lot of Haredim. Unfortunately, the modern Haredim did not get into the Jerusalem City Council this time after last week's election. And I do see that the trend is moving forward. But the question is it going to move forward fast enough for us not to have a complete collapse in the social contract? Or do you see that the only way forward now really is through this tragedy, a new social contract with the Haredim? Can it happen so dramatically is my question.
I think there is some Haredim really right for a new social contract. They understand and they are ready. I think the problem is that most of the traditional leadership isn't ready. But
are they not ready, Nechumi, because of power and influence? Or are they not ready because ideologically they're not ready? Because I see these people ideologically, they're probably closer to us, but they want to keep the power and the money and their institutions and their people.
I think it's a combination of things. It's easier to say it was just power and influence, but I think there is also a little bit of ignorance. I think if you are a spiritual leader, your focus is on different things, and your understanding of how modern world and economy operates is just limited.
It's not just you. Everybody's turning to the Haredim, right? And then the political system, it's not just, they're part of it, and they utilize it, and they usually utilize it well, at least in the short term. You have both on the right and the left constellations that keep this whole
status quo.
This whole status quo, because the right doesn't want, to fall apart, their government to fall apart, and
the left don't want to talk about the Arabs.
Yeah, I want to,
or whatever it is. It's not so much the Arabs; it's more like feminist issues or different issues. But in the end of the day, everybody has to take responsibility.
Let's just finish. A final thought, Dr. Nechumi Yaffe. You are the Vice President of Research of a newish think tank. What is the purpose of your think tank, and how do you think the work that you guys are doing in Tatia, which was founded by also a good friend of mine, is going to be improving the reality together, all of us as a society?
I think what's beautiful about this initiation is that it's all Haredim, it's all Haredi people that are very professional and extremely concerned, and they want to take responsibility and shift things around. So it's a bottom-up grassroots initiation. And my department is the data department. What we do is we try to map the community and ask people what they're, actually find the gaps between the people and their leadership, between the social norms, the accepted norms, and people's own, position, and see where the cracks are and understand how we can initiate change. The thing about Israel is Israel was born with miracles, and we had miracles through its existence. And I think the new miracle is going to be the awakening and the participation of the Haredi community.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bezrat Hashem. Thank you so much, Dr. Nechumi Yaffe. Thank you for the amazing work. And thank you to our guest host this week, my good friend Pnina Pfeuffer. And now for our very favorite section of our show, Scumbags and Heroes. Let's start with Scumbag of the Week. Ashira, who is your scumbag this week?
My scumbag of the week is Mohammed Abdul Karim. He is the murderer of Dr. Benjamin Haruni, the killing that took place in San Diego. It really hits home for me because I moved here from San Diego, so the entire San Diego Jewish community is my community. And
what happened, Ashira?
Dr. Benjamin Haruni, he's a dentist, and Mohammed was one of his previous clients. He walked in, he shot at 2 assistants, and he murdered Dr. Benjamin Haruni on site. And the local police department and law enforcement, they are not saying this is a hate crime. They're saying he was disgruntled.
Why?
There's mental instability.
They always say mental instability.
We don't know if it's anti-Semitism. So the entire Jewish community is calling on the mayor there, everyone to say, no, you guys need to investigate this to see if this was a hate crime and anti-Semitism. And to me, it's clear. I mean, he's a Muslim. They won't give us his ethnicity. They say he's from the Middle East. That's all they will say. And I mean, I really hope he gets life in prison.
Does anybody know anything about this guy? Hate speech or anything else?
They didn't pull up anything other than that he's been a past customer and they believe him to be disgruntled.
Well,
yeah.
My husband's a dentist and he's never had a disgruntled client who tried to kill him, thank God. So, yeah, I hear you. Yeah. That's pretty bad. And he's a worthy scumbag. Vivian, what about you?
So, my person is an Israeli official, very senior official. So just again, I've done this before. I'm going to refrain from using the word scumbag, but kind of think he's in that category. It's Major General Aharon Haliva. He is the general in charge of the IDF Military Intelligence Directorate. Many people may have heard of him on October 7th. He's the guy who was on vacation in Eilat. And when he was called and alerted to the fact that something might be up in the middle of the night, he said, yeah, call me back like after 9 tomorrow. Oh. And so here we are 5 months on. We now know in the intervening 5 months that he's the guy who all of the female scouts who were reporting for months, strange activity and drills and military prep. He was, whatever, a bunch of Hamas punks.
He's the one who didn't listen to the women.
Correct. When a senior officer in the IDF presented him with a detailed blueprint for exactly what they were planning to do militarily, and frankly, exactly what transpired on October 7th, Haliva's like, yeah, whatever. Stop bugging me, and if you persist, I'm going to court-martial you. Well, just last week, there was...
Still in his job? He's still in his job, Vivian?
This is why we want to replace governments and senior military officials who got us into this mess, because it's the same people who are going to continue to make the same really, really crappy decisions.
But he's not a government appointee, Vivian. He's somebody
who is a government military. No, there is no one yet. No, these are all BD appointees. Nobody gets into these head of Shabak, head of military intelligence, head of any of these top spots. These are BB's guys, all of them. And that's not me. That's me speaking to people who actually know what's going on in the military. Anyhow, what happened in the last week was there was disclosure of this fact that on the night, around midnight on, when it was turning into October 7th, there were hundreds of Israeli SIM cards that were activated in the Gaza Strip. Now, apparently military intelligence has seen this happen previously, but much, much smaller numbers, maybe 10s or 20s, but nothing like this. And the brain trust in charge said, yeah, whatevs. And they went back to sleep.
What's the meaning of that?
And the issue
SIM cards
is
activated. Just give us a little bit of why is that
so
a red flag?
It's a red flag because it allows them to communicate more easily in Israel. Why are thousands of SIM cards being activated? And on top of all of the other stuff, they've got these reports, strange activity on the border, blah, 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 blah. And Haliva said, when asked, well, now that this has come out, and had you known that at the time and not been sleeping, might you have responded differently? And he said, no, I would not have done anything differently. And I say, it's not even unrepentant. It's like, you do not have the chops to be in this job because you're just saying, no. You don't have the brains to do this job.
Yeah.
And he, to me, is the ultimate metaphor for the extreme negligence and incompetence that got us into this. And for the life of me, I will never understand why they remain in positions of power. So he's my guy.
Well, I think he's a worthy one indeed. Thank you. And it's kind of disturbing. So my scumbag this week is actually a scumbag for many, many years. His name is George Galloway. He was originally decades ago in the Labour Party, but he was so extreme that even the Labour Party in the UK kicked him out. Always been an anti-Semite, but an unrepentant one. Refuses to speak to any Israelis, in different scenarios where he's been presented. He doesn't speak to you. He doesn't recognize your right to be a human being or exist. And he's kind of been a fringe figure in the UK politics for many, many years now. And somehow last week, he got elected in a by-election as an MP in the UK, in a very Muslim region of the UK, because it's a regional system, a parliamentary system in the UK. And, his manifesto letter was all about Gaza, not about the people of the place he represents and what their needs are and what he's going to do for them. No. Everything is about Gaza. And of course, he appealed to people's emotions, the Muslim community's emotions on this war, and got re-elected.
This is for Gaza. You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging, and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
He is a horrible anti-Semite. The people around him are horrible anti-Semites. This is a person who shouldn't be serving in any public role, and yet he's back. And so I wish him all the best for a quick failure. And maybe he should actually do his job and represent the people of his constituency rather than look towards this region of the world. Maybe do your job. But he is a disgusting anti-Semite. Everybody hates him. And the UK really, I think that is a symptom of what's going on in the United Kingdom at the moment, why they're in trouble as a country, because essentially they have not dealt with jihadi extremists, and now they've elected their very own communist back into parliament. And so George Galloway, scumbag of the week, and probably every week from now on. And to end our show on a positive note, as we always try and do, we always have scumbags, but we have many more heroes, many more wonderful people in this world. And so let's talk about our heroes this week. Ashira, who's your hero?
My hero is actually an Instagram account called Bring Them Light _October 7th.
Oh, yes.
I don't know who runs the account.
I met the lady.
You did? Oh,
yes.
You know her?
It's a wonderful woman that I met.
This account is dedicated to the 1,400 people who were killed on October 7th.
Yeah.
And they make reels of each person of their life, how they were as a child, what they did, what they were passionate about, what they did for work. They show their family life. And I just think it's such a beautiful way to celebrate these people and their souls, and also to put a face to the name. Yeah. And to not forget them. And it inspires me to continue to work hard, via media, because we don't want any of their deaths to be in vain.
I think it's a really lovely hero, because it just humanizes, as you say, and the 1,200 people shouldn't be just a number.
Yeah.
Those people who were brutally murdered.
Yeah.
Thank you,
so
Shira.
I love that account.
Vivian.
My hero is Pamela Patton. I have to read this. Sorry, it's too long. Her title is UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict.
Okay.
She's just a great lady. She's, she has been in the past a lawyer in Mauritius. She was appointed to this position, 5 or 6 years ago. And amidst all of the denial and grotesque kind of, questioning of Israel and these survivors and all of this testimony that we have of the fact that violent rapes and all kinds of sexual assaults took place on October 7th and continue to this day. Pamela Patton came here for 2.5 weeks, and she came with a lot of staff, and she interviewed hundreds of people and officials and survivors, and she published a report yesterday saying, I believe Israel. I believe the women. I believe the men. I believe Israel. I think it's obscene that we've been questioning this to date. And I mean, this is a woman in a very powerful UN position that she'll probably lose soon, who is going against the entire machinery of the United Nations.
With regard to the hostages taken to Gaza, we found clear and convincing information that sexual violence, including rape, sexualized torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, has been committed against captives. And we also have reasonable grounds to believe that such violence may still be ongoing against those still held in captivity.
I say thank you, Pamela Patton, for saying what we know to be true and hopefully starting to turn the tide. It took great courage and integrity, and there aren't a lot of people like her in the UN.
100%, Vivian, and we should highlight the ones that are so amazing hero. And my hero this week, I guess, is a cluster of people, starting with Elise Stefanik, who is a congresswoman. And she's been leading all these special committees on anti-Semitism on campus. She was the one who questioned those presidents of those universities that embarrassed themselves with their answers about calling for genocide of the Jews is okay in a context. She was the person who went after them. And now she's actually taking testimony from the Jewish students suffering abuse on campus. And so my hero is Elise Stefanik, but it's also the brave Jewish students who were there, who testify, who bore witness to the fact that there's pogroms going on in campus. And she's given them a voice, she's done her work, but these young, wonderful young people, 19, 20, 21 years old, have been brave enough to come out and tell the truth of what's going on in campus. So that cluster of people dealing with anti-Semitism on campus are my heroes this week. And on that note, we finish our show. Next week, hopefully, we'll have our Emily back. And we pray, like we do every week, that by next week, all our hostages will be home with their families. Thank you.